All right, so if you guys remember, we ended our class period with the death of who? Archduke Franz Ferdinand. Remember, the second. Because remember, he's the guy, gets sniped at, throws a bomb at people, goes get some snacks, dies, all that fun jazz. And that kind of is our trigger point where everybody begins to follow into this war. Now, I always forgot to turn on. Now remember, why was this happening? It was that idea of that domino effect of alliance systems, right? Everybody has to go in and help out the little guy. And once that happens, everybody goes in, and now we're going to begin a world war. Now, before we get started into America's involvement, I really want you to understand why World War I was truly one of the most important events in American history. It wasn't just a war and alliances and stuff. We as human beings honestly changed because of that. And so the example that we're going to talk about is we're going to talk about how our warfare changed. So what I want you to do is on your homework assignment that you should have picked up, it's the sideways one that says hip analysis and stuff like that. On your right-hand side, there's this giant space where there's nothing underneath the hip analysis part. I want you to make that into a box. So draw a box in that space under where it says hip analysis. There's space for a box, and I want you to draw a box for me. Okay. All right, now what I want you to do with that box is I want you to split it in half. It doesn't matter which way. If you want to do it hot dog or hamburger, just split it in half. Okay, or you could do diagonal, which is probably the hardest one to do, but you've already done it. Okay. Yes. Okay, at the top of one side, I want you to put the word before at the top. Don't fill up the entire thing. It's just that's the title of the box is before. And the other one, what do you think it's going to be? After. You guys are so smart. Oh, well, now I guess it works too, but after. Okay, so what we're going to be looking at for a second is we're going to look at the before and after of how our warfare changed during World War I. So what I want you to do is I'm going to show you, That's grim. Hold on a second. Okay. All right. Before we start, I have to go from US to AP, so let me remember. So we're going to change our warfare during this time. And the major reason why we're going to change our warfare is due to the belt-fed machine gun. On your notes where it says changes of warfare or weapons of warfare or whatever it talks about, make sure it has on there belt-fed machine gun, which I believe, did I put it on there? No. Okay. Write it down. Yeah, machine gun. Write down belt-fed machine gun. And that is your turning point of warfare. We have thousands of years of warfare before this, and our turning point is this gun right here. Okay? Now, this belt-fed machine gun, what that means. Before we had machine guns in the Civil War, they basically had a magazine and a drum that just kind of turned like this. Now it's even worse. Now, if you see right here, you have these belts, and they're covered in ammo. These belts usually have about 1,000 rounds of ammunition on a single belt. And basically what it just does is it feeds through it, and it shoots typically around, I believe it's something around 60 bullets per minute, something around those lines. So we're 600, something like that, per minute. So we're talking boom, 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 right? And this is going to make a major difference in our warfare system. Now, because of this belt-fed machine gun, the reality is that war is going to change from something very chivalrous to almost something very cruel, and that's kind of how we've turned into our war today. So what I want you to do, this is your before picture. I want you to write down in your before box, looking at this, what was life or war like before the war? So this is the beginning of the war. So I want you to look at this. Think about what do they look like? What are they using? How are they fighting? What does it look like in this picture? Okay, that's what I want you to do right now. How does it look like in this picture? Just give me a description. It doesn't have to, especially for some of you small writers, it doesn't have to fill up the whole box. As long as I get an accurate description of what warfare was like before.
It's almost like a play.
Okay, say that in just a second. Let me talk to everyone. Okay. Good job. Okay. Ashton, you might have a good thing that you might say. Hi.
Hey, sorry.
No, it's okay. 1 second. Pause. You're the dancer.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so basically, they're going to be the WA ones. That's the most important thing because those are the women's athletic ones.
Okay.
As opposed to like WP back here.
Okay.
Don't do those ones.
Okay, WA.
So WA, any of these that are blank, they can use.
Okay.
And then, so you're going to have them write their name and the combo on this line.
Okay.
And the combos are back here. Again, find the WA, and it's going to be the second combination.
Second combination. Okay. Great. And then can I drop this in your box afterward?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Okay, sorry, we had some softball stuff we had to do real quick. Okay, Ashton, since you look like... Oh. Okay, guys.
Are they LARPing?
No. I'll explain what this is in just a second.
Looks like they are.
LARPing is live action role playing, if you don't know what that means. Okay. Ashton, what do you think this is showing?
It's like an organized, chivalrous, rightful play.
Yeah, doesn't it seem like they're kind of like set up to go to war? Like it's like they're all like in their fancy outfits and they're all like organized together. It's almost like that chivalrous idea of warfare, right? If you think about the Civil War we talked about before, remember how Pickett's charge, they like lined up on the sides and then they like did the drums and they all like walked towards each other? That's like chivalrous warfare, right? You go along the two sides, you don't just attack like surprising, you go together as an army. Crystal.
Oh, I was just going to say it looked like Civil War tactics.
Yeah, does this really look like modern day, like 1900s industrialism? No, what are they fighting with? Horses and swords, right? That's the cavalry. That's like back in Roman times. Why the heck are they doing that? So when we see this warfare, this is how we go in. Now, this is the British Army in the Battle of the Pre. They're going into this as what they've learned so far. You have your drills. You're in the cavalry. The cavalry is very honorable. You're going to go in with swords. You have a gun just in case, but you're not going to use it. Now what we're going to do is we are going to watch a clip of how warfare is going to change. So your box, your question is going to be, how did warfare change? Does anybody know what movie this is from? It's a phenomenal movie. Okay, it's from the movie War Horse. If you have not seen War Horse, literally watch it and just cry. It's great. If you want to borrow it from me, I will totally let you borrow it. It's a fantastic World War I movie. But we're going to watch this clip, and in this clip, I want you to think, how did warfare change? And I will say it's like really sad. And I have to be careful because I always like tear up in this movie because I love animals. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and watch this.
So we're writing.
In the box, how did it change based on this clip? Oh, come on. Okay. The system sometimes doesn't turn on. We'll talk about Forrest Gump in this class. Okay. All right, listen.
Good luck, my friends.
Okay, so based on that clip that you just watched, how did warfare change in World War I? So what impact did this new way of warfare change with World War I? Again, writing, how did warfare change? Yes?
Are we going to put more than just these two in the boxes?
No. So you can use up the space in the boxes. You're just doing before and after. How is it before and how is it now? Okay, so who can tell me based on what we just watched, how did warfare change in World War I? Yes?
They did like a surprise thing. They just like killing people even though they didn't have like a way to defend themselves or anything.
Okay. Now that's something that we've had in war before. So that was kind of the before part, right? Using the swords and things like that. What do you think?
Well, when they were fighting with swords, I feel like there is a slim chance you could survive from that. Maybe run away. There's no chance you can survive against that. You can't fight if you have guns versus swords.
Okay, so it's almost like bringing a knife to a gunfight. Ethan?
With the use of machine guns, when for the Civil War they used something called fire by rank, where they're all lined up like that.
Yeah.
But you're forced to find cover when you use machine gun because if you hold one position with 40 horses, it's different than one machine gun versus 40 horses.
Yeah, so it's almost like completely like outmatched, right? It's almost an unfair fight. Nick, by the way, you know a lot about warfare. I like it. Yeah.
When they like stormed the camp, they were outnumbered and they were all running away to the trees and they had like all their numbers of horse people.
Yeah.
And then when they got into forest and they just started firing, they just opened down. And it was
Yeah.
they were outnumbered.
Yeah, exactly. So another outmatched.
Seems like they need less training and they can use like different tactics.
Yeah, and if you've seen the movie, which apparently almost none of you have, but if you've seen the movie, like 30 minutes of the movie is them in England, and every day they'll just drill, and they're training and they're fighting. Do you need a ton of training to be able to shoot a machine gun? No. You have one person that learns how to feed it, and the other one pulls the trigger. And this is an automatic weapon, by the way. This is not semi-automatic. You hold the trigger down, and it goes boom, 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 boom. And this actually is semi-automatic in the movie because they have to do that now. You can't have an automatic weapon.
It seemed more like that, like who could kill who could kill however many people the most. Like it was actually like it wasn't like about like who's more honorable and who deserves to win. It's more like the strongest, biggest, best.
Yeah, so it's sort of like that too. And one thing I like to relate this to as well, when you have that sword at the beginning with the horses and they're slicing, the people, do you almost have to like look them in the eye when you're doing that or like see them as a human? Do you have to see them as a human with a machine gun? Mm-mm. No, they're just objects that you're killing. Yeah.
I think like originally war was kind of like this proud thing. It was almost like with sports teams and stuff. And
yeah.
People would, go and like have their big battle where everyone would like march towards each other. But now it's just kind of like this kind of dirty sort of just kill as many people as possible.
Yeah. And do you guys remember in the Civil War when we talked about that very first battle, Bull Run, how everyone went along the side and just like watched it as if it was like a sporting event? And now it's just turning into, are we really having one single battle in one day? No, we're just having just like constant warfare, right? Okay. I thought I saw somebody else. Okay, I'm finished with you. Oh, well, finish with you.
Talked about this a lot yet, but with the trend of warfare and machine guns, you can't use horses anymore, and so it turns into a war of attrition, whereas it's whose resources will run out first, rather than whose side is the one that should die.
So it's almost like it's a defensive war of like who's gonna last the longest. Good. Okay, last one.
There was no charging if you have the guns, and you can do it from a distance, which can give you the advantage if they're running on swords. So.
And here's another thing. If you can't charge, what are you just gonna do? Just gonna sit there. Yeah. And we're gonna talk about that in just a second. That actually connects both of yours. So we can see that in this warfare was completely changed during World War I. Now, when we talk about the impact of this, the impact, and by the way, I would put this on your notes, of like, if you were to do like cause is belt-fed machine gun, The effect is what is called trench warfare, and that's a very important term that you're going to need to know, is trench warfare. Both of those two terms are super crucial here. Because like we were talking about before, this is what Jessica was saying, right? If you have a machine gun, you're not going to charge, right? Because what are you going to do? You're just going to get shot, right? So you have to protect yourself. So we begin what's called trench warfare, and it sounds exactly like what it is. Basically, you have these mass trench systems, and all you do is you sit there, and you wait. And if somebody comes at you, you shoot at them. But it becomes a very defensive tactic of war. Now, these trench warfare systems, or trenches in World War I, are very complex systems. Basically, you have all of these like routes and things like that. And then you have like usually a layer of barbed wire or something like that. Does anybody know what this is called? It's no man's land. Okay, why is it no man's land? What happens if you go there?
You die.
You die. There's no living men there. Now, this no man's land, by the way, typically these trenches will be like miles long. No man's land will be anywhere from, it could be usually half a mile up to 2 miles long. So again, are we really fighting each other aggressively at each other? No, we're waiting till the other one screws up, and then we can take advantage of this. Now, when we talk about how life was like in these trenches, okay, Europe is rainy, and it is muddy. And that means that every single day you are living in rain, and you are living in mud. And what happens because of this is we begin to have massive amounts of disease. Does anybody know what the major disease that comes out of this?
Dysentery.
Well, dysentery, yes. There's one specifically I'm talking about with trenches. Has the word in it. No, not chlamydia. Why would it be chlamydia? No. Okay, trench foot. Good job, everyone. That's okay. That was a hard one. I was wondering if anybody knew it. Okay, listen. Now let me explain how trench foot works. So what happens is that you are constantly having your feet in this water. It's almost like being in a hot tub for like hours and hours upon end. And what happens is that with all that moisture that collects in your boots, you don't take your boots off, because if so, you're stepping in mud. So you'll go like 7-8 months with never taking your shoes off. The problem is, what builds up in there? Bacteria, nastiness, water. Now, I'm going to show you some pictures of what trench foot looks like. In particular, if you have a foot fear, which I know is very common, or you just don't like looking at disgusting pictures, I would suggest looking away now, especially if you have a thing about feet, because it really is, yeah. Okay, so let's talk about what happens with trench foot. So the first thing is that your body begins to take in all that moisture. And if you've ever like been in a hot tub for a long time or a swimming pool, you start to see this. Basically, your body soaks up moisture and it sags out. So that's what you see here. So this is what first happens. But then what happens is all that extra skin doesn't get the nutrients it needs. Okay, again, this is mega warning. Mega warning. Okay? So then what happens is your skin begins to die. And as it begins to die, I mean, it literally just like begins to like flake off. Frostbite as well in winter, when your feet are super wet and it freezes, you basically turn into an icicle. And so what happens is that your toes die from frostbite, and the rest of your foot begins to be massively, massively infected. And by the way, you don't know this is happening because you don't feel it, because you're so ingrained in it that you just don't even notice it. And so then as it continues to go on, you begin to massively lose a lot of your skin. Sometimes it would go all the way down to the bone or the muscle because you were losing so much dead skin. Frostbite, again, as you can see right here, this was like one of the more common things, especially when it hit winter, because if you don't know, European winters are extremely cold. And people began to lose their feeling in their feet, and they would have to get either their feet amputated or their legs amputated. Now, here's another thing, though. You see, all that dead skin is perfect for rats. And so what they would do is, as you were asleep, they'd come and they'd chew through your boot, and they would eat all the dead skin on your feet, and you would wake up, and you would literally just have lost part of your foot because rats had been sitting there eating it. Part of the reason why, if you've ever heard of a Jack Russell Terrier, or if you might have one of those, they were used in World War I to be able to capture those rats in order to be able to stop them from eating people's feet while they were asleep. Now, when we talk about the effect of this, so I want to read this to you. This is your life with trench foot. If you have never had trench foot described to you, I'll explain. Your feet swell to 2 to 3 times their normal size and go completely dead. You can stick a bayonet into them and not feel a thing. If you are lucky enough not to lose your feet and the swelling starts to go down, it is then the most indescribable agony begins. I have heard men cry and scream with pain, and many have had to have their feet and legs amputated. I was one of the lucky ones, but more each day in the trench and may have been too late. Okay? So life in these trenches is absolutely miserable. So we're going to learn what you guys would be like if you guys were in the trenches and kind of the importance of trench warfare in World War I. Now, as we do this game, you will need to have 100% of everything put away in a backpack preferably, because we're going to be moving it out of the way. So please put it in your backpack. You're going to want it as far away from you as you can. I'll show you where you can put all your bags in just a second. Yep. Oh, you know what? This game may not be very good for you. So what we'll probably have you do is we'll have you sit in one of these chairs and just hang out, because this game is not dangerous. Again, 100% of everything needs to go away. If not, it's not going to work out well for you. Okay. Okay, so I'm splitting you in half right now, so make sure you're paying attention. So Nick's row and over, and Ashton's row and over are team 1. Everybody else on this side is team 2. And by the way, I need to put this row on or else it's going to get too. That'd be a really bad email. Yeah, remember that one time? This didn't work out. Okay, so let me explain what your goal is in this game. Okay, team 1 is the yellow team. Team 2 is the orange team. Basically, this game involves capture the flag. Now, let me explain how this is going to work. You guys are going to have a chance to set up your trenches. You may use all of the desks that your students are in, so everyone has equal desks. Okay?
Mega desk.
Now, team 1 must be on this side of the projector. Team 2 must be on that side. I don't care how tall you make your trenches or how you make them, as long as they're not going to fall over and hit you. Okay? Now, other things. Okay, listen. Now, other things to be able to note about this game. Again, this game only works if you pay attention and you don't injure each other, or else I have to stop playing the game. And I want to keep playing the game, because this is really fun. Okay? So, your team must work together to build your trenches. What will happen is once you've built your trenches, I will put the flags on each side, and the first team to get the flag wins. That's the goal. And we'll talk about that in a second. Now, listen. Okay, now here's the last thing, because you guys can't have trenches without weapons. Okay, now, you guys might remember our cows from a couple times ago. They're coming back as weapons. So, here's how this will work. Listen. So, these are your machine guns and artillery shells and mortars. This is what you will be hitting each other with. Now, if you get hit, you automatically die. So, for your question about can we just run over and get it, if you're hit, you die. So the goal is to make it so that you guys don't get hit. Yes? No, this is a dodgeball. Would you catch a bomb and be like, oh, it's fine? Or what about Okay, so you can't touch it, and you can't catch it and say that they're out of the dodgeball. Okay, you have 5 minutes to work together. Okay, listen. All of your backpacks need to go. Let's put them over in the corner next to the door.
stack it up like that. Stack it up like that. That works.
Okay, listen. We're going to be starting easier this time. Easier. Can I say you guys yellow or orange? Yellow. We're starting off easy and then you have 1 minute left. 1 minute left.
Hey, guys, James, let's go now. Let's go. James, get over here. Who's the most
Yeah, like fun. So that's how like I think around us, so like have people in the organize.
Hey, alright, Hey guys. Okay, so really quick rules of the game. Number 1, don't be one of those people, okay? Don't be one of those people who's like, it didn't hit me, or it's not fair, or whatever. Have a positive attitude, okay? Okay, more directions. Okay, number 2, once you die, you lay down where you died, okay? So, also, we're not playing like no hits in the head or anything. That doesn't mean walk up to him and be like smacked in the head, okay? Be respectful. There's no hands. Alright, you guys know where your flags are? Yeah. I placed it there for a reason. You didn't pick this up.
I won't die, okay?
We're starting off easy. Okay, here and here. Okay, what? No, if you hit the wall or the ceiling and then it hits you, then it's no. Okay,
Someone's possibly
ready? No, not yet. Okay, ready? Set, go! You know, you're supposed to be capturing the flag.
Dodger.
How does this spot over there for them? Okay. Alright, listen. Maybe this way. Alright, listen. Hey, listen. Okay, really quick, as a reminder, we saw this right away. You're supposed to be getting the flag. Some of you forgot that until I reminded you.
I was already like, I was laughing because I was like, trucking and you said the flag. And I was like,
Alright. Okay, how many? Okay. Hey, how? Over there.
How's it cheating? We're really trying to drop the flag. It's called adapting to the state. We want to just leave the flag.
Ready? Also, you can't push forward your trenches if you're like stabbing people with the chair. Okay. Ready? Set. Go. Everybody stayed for the most part. It wasn't until one person just like ran, but then everybody just like, imagine what would have happened if this team had just charged. First off, you guys would have been scared. And two, like it just wasn't normal, right? So the thing about trench warfare is because of this artillery, it's a defensive war, right? You're waiting until the other person falls in order to be able to succeed, okay? All right, this is what you need to do. You need to put all ammunition into this box. All chairs go back to where they go. Ready and go. Let's see how quickly you guys can do this. Wait, I don't mind this game. This is terrible. I know, right? Guys, that was cool. Some of you really made stuff up.
That's right.
That's her I got it backwards. The ball gets back to where they go. What row? We're missing this one other side. You need a chair here. Okay, go sit down once you put the. That was pretty fast. Good job. Okay, go sit down. I told you we would have fun today. You all shouted. See, I told you it only works if you were sitting down. Well, that wasn't necessarily my fault.
Hold you back in.
Okay. All right. I know. Problem is, I don't have games like that for every time, so I'll have to keep trying to one-up myself. So, in my U.S. history class, whenever they're bored, they're like, Miss Ray, can we just go back and do trench warfare again? And I'm like, guys, we can't just keep playing that game over and over again. Like, we have to move on. There's other activities that we need to do.
Are they good at it?
So my 4A is like really hyperactive, kind of like you guys. And so like, they like really did an awesome job and their strategies were really cool. And then my 1B is a little bit more mellow. And so about half of them just sat there staring, and the other half got excited. So it all depends on the class.
At the end of the year, can we just play trench warfare?
Just every day?
No, yeah.
Like after the entire.
I will say what's really fun is I used to have tables. And so what's more fun about tables is you're able to stack them better and have like different levels of machine guns. Yes?
After the AP test, can we play?
Maybe we will play up against Miss... I wouldn't want to hurt Miss Pickett's feelings. So we're not to win too hard. We have too much experience now. Yeah, the robot recorded the whole time.
No way! Did it get... It probably got me standing up being like...
I don't know. I don't know how much it actually filmed because it was in the back, but we'll go from there. Although now it's not tracking anymore. Okay. All right, listen. So through this whole idea of trench warfare, through the idea of changing kind of how we're going to do warfare in America, in the world, Now we're going to get a lot more vicious, a lot more not really caring about who you're killing. It's all about this idea of total warfare. Okay? So yeah, if you don't have your stuff out, grab. Like a crab. So funny. I'm so sorry. It's just so funny all the time. I made a joke and it was hilarious. You missed it, so and I only get one a year, so. Okay. All right. I know we're super hyper now. Okay. Now, a fantastic example of kind of the effects of all these different versions of warfare is in what we call the Battle of the Pre. Now, a lot of things happen in the Battle of the Pre that are, it shows really the totality and the total warfare that we're going to be doing during this time. Now, another thing about the Battle of the Pre that's a little bit of a fun fact, in this picture, there's somebody in this picture that fought in the Battle of the Pre and got severely injured. Does anybody know?
Hitler.
Archduke is already dead.
The third.
Hitler. Okay?
Is it that girl with the mustache?
No, it's a big mustache.
Is Hitler in this picture? Is he the one with the deadly?
He's discovered.
Yeah, that one.
Okay, now listen. Okay, now listen. Now, the Battle of the Pre, again, it was one of the very first battles of the war. We did have a lot of things come from it. One of those things ended up being Adolf Hitler. During this battle, he ended up basically fighting. He saved some of his comrades. He received what is called the Iron Cross, which is basically the Medal of Honor. It is the highest military honor. He was then put into the hospital, which is where he began his Mein Kampf and starting to kind of get his ideologies. Part of it is truly based on this war. He saw the brutality of warfare, and he saw that Germany did not do enough to be able to protect its soldiers and its citizens afterwards, and that's kind of how it began. So again, we're already going back into 1916 into this. Now, the other thing, though, that happens is a little bit more positive, and it all has to do with this wonderful holiday, which is so close with Hanukkah, but it's Christmas. Christmas on this one. Now, let me explain what happens at Christmas time. You see, Christmas is kind of a universal thing. And in Germany, the major religion in Germany is Christianity. So what happens then when you're in a battle, you've been fighting now for months, and you're just sitting there on Christmas Day, and you have nothing to do? Are you going to tell me what happens? Okay, I'm going to pause it, because we want to make it a surprise. I know, but we're going to have a surprise. So what ends up happening is that the two are going to come together, the Germans and the English, and the French as well. And they're going to come together in what is known as the Christmas Tree Truce. And to be able to show you the Christmas Tree Truce, we are going to watch one of the best commercials ever. And we're going to watch the Christmas Tree Truce. Now, hopefully this gets you to buy an object, which we'll see, because that's the point of the truce. But this was voted one of the top, I think it was 2014, top commercials in the world. Yes?
They were on different sides and they came out, or they all...
Well, if you watch the video, we'll show you. Okay, so watching this video about the Christmas Tree Truce. So, oops. As I turn this on, so this kind of shows, though, that just because in the brutality of warfare, not everything has to be so brutal.
Check it. Okay. Done.
name is Jim. Mein Name ist Otto. Pleased to meet you, Otto. Freut mich. Rose, she's home. And soon home. Home. Happy Christmas. Frohe Weihnachten.
Now you guys are all going to go buy chocolate, right?
Is that like how it happened?
No, so that really is actually extremely similar to how it happened in real life. So basically, and now in the chocolate, it's not really chocolate. But what happened in real life is basically on this Christmas day of the first year of the war, we have this thing called the Christmas tree truce, which happens just outside of France. And basically what they agreed to is a ceasefire. Now, this was not the national government saying we're going to stop fighting, we're going to all be friends. This was kind of like a localized thing, so some still fought and some still didn't. But in about a 100-mile stretch, thousands of soldiers decided to stop for one day to celebrate Christmas. Now, after this time, once it got kind of out, the generals said, you're never going to do this again, this was a bad idea, you could have gotten shot, whatever. But during this Christmas tree truce, all of them ended up coming together. They played soccer. They came together and sang carols. They ate meals together. And it was one of those things about kind of showing that even in this total warfare or trench warfare, you can still have some sort of humanity in this whole situation. Okay. Now, unfortunately, we're going from a really happy thing to an unfortunate, very sad thing. You see, this is a creation of several weapons of war that are extremely serious, and one of those includes chemical warfare. Now, this idea of chemical warfare, though, comes from the Germans. We had kind of used it a little bit earlier in a couple of wars, but the Germans are really going to solidify this. Now, in this use of chemical warfare, by the way, chemical warfare, is it legal nowadays, by the way? No, it is not. The Geneva Convention after World War II banned the use of chemical warfare. And the reason why is because this chemical is one of those things that it overcomes you. While you can kind of dodge and whatever your bullets and kind of stay away, the reality is that when this massive cloud comes through, it's going to overwhelm you and overtake you. Now, the types of chemical warfare during World War I. Now, we start all the way over here with the one that we do still use, which is tear gas. Now, this is not the tear gas we use now. This tear gas was almost 100% pepper. Tear gas nowadays, I believe, is 80-ish% is military use tear gas. And then, you have, the pepper spray and stuff, which goes down from there. Now, going over into the right-hand side, the most dangerous one that you could have is chlorine. What happens, basically, when you have chlorine gas and you ingest it is basically your body doesn't know how to react to the gas, and so what it does is it basically fills up your lungs with fluid, and it tries to wash it out, and your lungs fill up with so much fluid that you literally drown inwardly. So you basically drown within about 5 minutes of that chlorine gas. No, this was illegal during World War I. It becomes illegal after World War II. Now, continuing to go over here as well, phosgene was not used as much, but was actually a lot more deadly. About 85% of people affected with phosgene gas did die. And then over on the far right is the one that you've probably heard of the most, which is mustard gas. Now, mustard gas actually didn't kill that many. It only killed about 2% of the people who it came in contact with. But mustard gas was worse because of the effects on you as a person. Basically, you would ingest the gas, and your lungs would be covered in little welts all over the inside of your lungs. So basically what happens is it lessens the amount of air you can intake, so you pretty much wheeze and like have a difficulty breathing for the rest of your life. Additionally, on your skin, you get welts all over your skin, all over your lips, and those are permanent scars that you have. So while it doesn't kill you, you're going to be basically gasping for breath for the rest of your life because of this gas. Yeah?
What happens if someone decides to use this stuff again?
Great question. You're talking about a country called Syria. So, according to the Geneva Convention, it's illegal. Now, did we come back in Vietnam and use Agent Orange? Yes, that wasn't technically supposed to be on people, but affected them anyways. Now, the one that's the big one now is Syria. So what happened is back in 2011, and this is just like a little snippet of American history, if you guys ever say that high schoolers don't make any difference and can't make any political difference, go ask Syria. What happened is back in 2011, there were 11 high schoolers that did not like their president. So they decided to go to their high school and they graffitied on the wall that they were anti this president. The president then responded by dropping chemical bombs on Syria. And we talk about chemical bombs, we're talking about it's nerve gas. So basically it drops on you, you inhale it, your brain literally ceases to function and doesn't fire anymore. You begin to have seizures, and then you eventually pass away after about an hour of suffering. This is especially impactful to kids. Since that time, Syria continues to drop bombs every single day pretty much on their people. That's why we have the Syrian refugee crisis of people leaving because of this. 2-3 days ago, the United Nations told Syria that you must immediately stop doing this or else, I should say. And Syria responded by dropping 6 bombs in a single day. So now this is all like conjecture because the president says he's never done this before, and that he doesn't know who's dropping these bombs on his people. But it's pretty serious in Syria right now. When you like see Aleppo and stuff, it's pretty serious. Now, what will the UN do? I don't know. The last time the UN really went into a war was in Rwanda, and we all know how that happened and ended up. And then Korea, and we all know how that, well, maybe not, but Korea didn't work out well too. So who knows? Yeah, it's kind of sad, serious. Yeah.
What does phosphine gas do?
So phosphine gas basically makes you suffocate into yourself. So pretty much your lungs go like a balloon. It's almost like squeezing a balloon out, and it pretty much crinkles up like a raisin. Yeah. So when we talk about, remember how we said about how warfare changed? Are you guys seeing how like warfare is completely transformed by World War I? It's really pretty sad and serious. Now, this idea of all of this mass death, though, this is like really when we're talking about this massive amount of death going on in the world, and people are shocked by it. Now, while in American history, does anybody know what the deadliest war was? Civil War, yeah. And it has to do with the Civil War, obviously, because we were fighting each other. I mean, who else is going to die? Worldwide, though, World War I, I believe, is considered the second most deadliest war, followed by number 1 is World War II. But we kill millions of people. I believe it's 7.1 million deaths, and something like 50 million people got injured or something along those lines.
What's the world population at this time?
Goodness, you have to give me hard. I don't even know if I could estimate it. Does anybody want to look up that? Okay, Ashton will look it up. Will you just Google world population 1910, and that'll be a proxy.
I might not be able to.
Okay, who has a cell phone? Okay, Jordan got it. Or Jordan, that didn't make English sense. Okay, Jordan will figure this out. Okay, now as she's looking it up, though, this massive amount of death ends up becoming a massive toll on its people. And one of the things that happened with this massive thing is we get to have, not just in America but around the world, ways to be able to combat this in the best of their ability. And one of those abilities is actually with peaches. Anybody like peaches? Okay, nifty. Fun fact about peaches. If you crush up peaches and you put it into a mask, it helps block the chemical gases. And so while we begin to develop warfare and weapons, we also begin to be really ingenious almost of how we're going to combat that with something as simple as this. So when we eventually go into the war, people were encouraged to actually bring peaches to the government and donate it so that we can make gas masks for our soldiers. Yes?
Would it smell good?
Oh, hold on.
Are you saying you like crush up the peach flesh?
I believe you do the seeds. But I think the flesh goes in there as well. You're saying how much it would smell? I don't think people would really be caring about how much it smells.
You're surviving.
Personally, you're in survival mode.
Don't like peaches and most like stone fruits have like cyanide with it,
Yes, but isn't that if you ingest it? Yeah. So in this case, you're not ingesting it. It's just it's masking it.
They just banned 19. I got 19.
I
thought like propane bombs.
Yeah, I think that they're more. I think that their version, because the actual 1.7 billion, so 1/8 of what we have, are a little more like 1/7 of what we have right now. Now, in terms of your question, I know that the law says specifically chemical warfare, which is more than likely why we're still able to use propane gas, and part of the reason why we can still have nuclear bombs. Because I think it's specifically chemicals, because it's cruel and unusual. Because while a giant atomic bomb, in theory, you die right away. Chemical bombs, as we've seen in Syria, you take an hour to die and you suffer. I mean, and I would highly suggest not going and watching for these videos on YouTube, because after the Aleppo bombing, all these ones went viral of these videos of kids dying. And I mean, I've seen it because I want to be informed for you guys. But I mean, these kids, it's literally if you took a raisin or a grape and put it out into the sun and you watched it for hours shrivel up and die, that's what it's like watching. So I think it's chemical because it's the cruel and unusual part of it. Because if not, all of our weapons would be banned. And we don't have a ban on nuclear weapons because there's the two major nations, U.S. and Russia, that have the majority of the nuclear weapons. Yeah.
Or a nuclear bomb and the gas spread, doesn't that also lead to prolonged deaths too?
Good question. They're not banned. This is what I can tell you. What I can tell you is that it's not the gas, it's the radiation. So what happens is you have a thing called fallout. And basically what happens with fallout is as the mushroom cloud goes up, it gets into the atmosphere, and then magic science happens where clouds kind of take it outward. And as it takes it outwards and it begins to fall, just like precipitation, it begins to have that radiation fall on you. Depending on the atomic bomb, I mean, we've made atomic bombs or nuclear weapons as well, that can reach all the way up to 100 miles of fallout. So it just depends. Because when we get into Hiroshima and Nagasaki, we see people from miles away. The reality is, though, is that if we think Hiroshima and Nagasaki is bad, then you have not seen our weapons right now. Because we have I think it's called the Big Tsar, is the nuclear weapon that USSR comes out with in the 60s. The Tsar bomb. Yeah, I knew I was close. But that bomb was 110 times larger than Hiroshima. And that bomb was detonated as a practice bomb. And if you think of that in the 60s, well, because we're all skipping ahead to the last period in American history. Where do we? Los Alamos is where we did ours. But we're actually, after the World War II, we actually go out next to the Philippines, and we buy some islands out, and then we send them off there. And this will all be explained in just a little bit. Okay? So I'm going to go back to this just because I want to show you something else. Now, this is where we get to the last thing about the Battle of the Pre. Now, you may have heard of the Battle of the Pre inconspicuously in your English classes. And the reason why is because the Battle of the Pre is the creation of a poem called In Flanders Fields. Now, this poem is one of the most famous poems in American history. It has been used on a sourcing or a DBQ before. If you will do me a favor, and if you will grab your assignment for today, I'm going to kind of go over how this assignment is going to work. Flip to the back first, okay? Now, let me explain about how In Flanders Fields works. Now, In Flanders Fields was a poem that was written by a guy. He was a soldier in the army. He saw pretty much his commander, who just happened to be one of the most loved commanders out of everyone. He saw one of his commanders die. And that hurt him so much that he decided to write this poem called In Flanders Fields. Now, the point of this poem has to do with these things called Flanders Fields, which Flanders is like a peasant field. So it's kind of like a mass peasant grave, nothing really special about it. And it talks about how there's just crosses and death everywhere, and yet these poppies just keep, I don't want to say popping because I'm trying to be serious here, but they keep coming up. And in all this massive death, there's still this light underneath, and yet everyone is dying. Now, with this idea of this poem as well, this poem went completely massive in England because of it. And it became so popular that the poppy became known as a symbol of basically memorial and veterans. Now, in England, by the way, which is where this person was from, in the month of November, that's their Veterans Day, but they have an entire Veterans Month. And one of the things that they do is they wear poppies. Now, what the soccer players do, though, is that they'll take an armband, which you can kind of see it right here, and it has a poppy on it, and they wear it throughout the month of November as remembrance in the Premier League, which is like the top soccer league in England. Well, the thing is that the English national team had a friendly, I think it was against Iceland, and they went over to compete in this, and they wore their armbands. Now, it's just like the NFL, though. You're not supposed to wear, like, political things, and you're not supposed to wear political things. But basically what they told them is you can't wear this because it's a political symbol. So the National Soccer Federation told them that. And so they said, if you choose to wear this, you're going to be fined $50,000 as a national team. The team came together and all agreed, and they all wore the poppies on their armband and received the fine. Because in England, this idea of the poppy is so important. Yeah?
Don't they also have like a poppy garden?
Yep, right outside. I believe it's Buckingham Palace, I believe it is. They put, I believe it's one poppy for every person who died in England, if I remember correctly. I'm not genius on it, but I'm pretty sure that's what happens. Now, next November, does anybody know, by the way, what Veterans Day is? What day of the month it is in November in America?
It's a Tuesday.
Well, it's not a Tuesday. It's actually a date. So November 11th at 11:11. So where you get this idea of the lucky 11/11 actually goes back to Veterans Day. That's the time that we signed the Treaty of Versailles to end the war. Around that time period, usually I see them at Walmart especially, but Smith's too, you'll see these veterans and they'll be handing out these poppies for you to wear. And the reason why is because of that in Flanders Fields. It's in remembrance of those who've died. So poppies have kind of been really synonymous with this idea of veterans' rights and veterans memorializing. So here's what you're going to do on this side of the paper. So I'm going to explain the entire assignment of what you're going to do. So the first thing that you're going to do is you're going to read the poem, okay, and really find those key parts of what this is. Now, some of you might see some words like Flanders that you don't know. You're free to look them up. Obviously not right now because this is not assignment time. But you're going to read through this and answer the questions below. Okay, so that's step number 1. Step number 2 is on the poppy on the right. You guys are going to pretty much memorialize those who have died in World War I. So how you're going to do this is you can decorate this however you want. There's many different ways that you can do this. I'm going to show you some ones that my regular U.S. kids did. But you can memorialize this in absolutely any way. So what this person did is this person took each stanza of the poem and they wrote it on the outsides of theirs. This one isn't like the fanciest one, but that's okay. This person decided to write basically a letter. So if you were to write a letter to the person who died, what would you say? And then they wrote the letter along the petals. That's one option that you can be able to do. I was going to find one. This person wrote a poem about it. A lot of people, some of the ones that I really like. So this person, they drew this, and it says, sacrifice. Oh, wait. Let's see where it starts. Oh, it says, ripples your sacrifice creates. And then they created like this little thing about the ripples going out of the impact of the war. So you can decorate this in any possible way that you want. This is just memorializing those who passed away, not just in America, because I don't want you to think go America, Memorials America. You have to realize that a lot of populations massively passed away in this war. So we're memorializing anybody in any country, anybody who passed away for what they felt was right. Okay? So that's your 2 assignments on the back. Also, on the bottom of your poppy, you'll see where it says to answer that question. Basically, you're just explaining to me how did you memorialize them and why. Okay? Understand part 1? Yes?
Are we just going to draw on this white poppy?
Yep. If you want to color it, if you want to do however you want to decorate it. Normally I do this, but we just don't have time. Okay, next thing that you're going to do, if you will flip the paper over. Now, on the left, you're going to see a pretty long source, but it's a pretty intense source, about the very first chemical bomb that was used, or chemical weapon that was used in World War I. So what you do is, if you see at the top, it says to underline the most important things, which is 5 of the most important things in this little part. Then on a separate piece of paper, you're just doing a hip analysis of it. So it's super, super easy. What are they trying to get across in this? And you're going to realize this is a German describing him watching the French die with the first bomb. Okay? The whole assignment takes about 30 minutes. It's pretty intense, I'll let you know, especially when you read the chemical warfare one and you realize kind of what's happened in the past. But this assignment is going to be due next class, okay? So if you need to write that in a planner, put it in your phone. Next class, this assignment is going to be due. Okay? All right. Just waiting for everybody to kind of have a chance to get this done. And I just get through this really fast. All right, so now that we've learned all about all the stuff occurring in World War I, by the way, we'll be on our notes for the rest of the time, so we won't be flipping in between different papers. So now that we've learned about all the events of World War I, now we have to actually get to the American part. Why was America even bothering or in this war? Now, you will need to know that Woodrow Wilson, this part right here, this is everything that you really need to know about Woodrow Wilson. If you're going to get a Woodrow Wilson question on the AP exam, it's going to be one of these. Okay? So I know we talked about him with progressivism. If they throw in a progressivism, come tell me and I will give you a candy bar because I will be shocked if they ever bring that up. However, this right here, Woodrow Wilson is World War I. That should be your automatic thought when you think of Woodrow Wilson, is you need to think he was the person in World War I. Mostly because he was the president during this time. Now let's explain basically why Woodrow Wilson was coming in. Yes?
Because it's like, this is stupid, but like, this is how I'm going to remember it. Like the two W's, Woodrow Wilson, World War.
The first two W's.
Yes. That's smart. First two W's, World War.
Wait, so sorry, when did this start?
So the war itself started in 1914. I believe, if I remember correctly, I think Wilson comes into the presidency in 1912. Almost 100% sure it's 1912. And then he stays into the presidency until 1920. So Wilson comes into the presidency in 1912. War in Europe begins 1914. We go into war and declare war, I believe, in 1917. War ends in 1919 on November 11th, 1919. 1919, 1918. It's November 11th at 11/11. Yeah. Oh, no? Oh, cool. Anyway, so Woodrow Wilson is going to be your president during this time. So America turning towards war. You should probably put a bracket around this and put causes and then like in parentheses, America. This is why America went into World War I.
So the causes for.
This is the causes for us going into World War I, yes. Now, America going towards war. Now, number one, this is kind of like, just think economics, right? If a country is in a war, are they going to be able to trade with us and spend money? No, not at all. So we have that kind of going on. Now, the next thing that's going to happen, though, and this one is really important, is the idea of the U-boat. So I would underline or star the word U-boat. Now, U-boats is basically, and I'm sure you're probably going to tell it to me differently because I know you know more about it, but for the basics of this, we're going to say it's a German submarine. That's the easiest way to be able to remember it. And I'm sure I know there's a lot more. Yes?
This is for when Hunt for Red October comes, right?
What's that?
Hunt for Red October is during this time period? Or is that World War II?
No, it's World War I. Yeah, Hunt for Red October, I believe, is World War I.
Why is it called a U-boat?
Underwater boat. But underwater,
Like a U shape.
yeah, but then the U is a German word. So but we just call it a U-boat.
Okay.
You only need to know the word U-boat. Now, it's basically a submarine, but it's a giant submarine. And the thing about these that were different is that U-boats basically were unrestricted warfare. They pretty much went wherever they wanted. They could get through basically undetected because we didn't have radar systems until World War II. And so basically these guys would just patrol. And they were vicious. They would go in what's called a wolf pack, which is basically where they would all go in the U-boats. They would surround a U.S. ship, and they would bomb it, and it would explode. So these U-boats were very dangerous. By the way, fun fact about U-boats. When we say the war happened in Europe in World War I, that is not true. We have found sunken U-boats off the coast, like within 20 miles of our eastern coast. In fact, I believe they just found a U-boat like 6 months ago off of like Connecticut, and I think that one was 10 miles offside the coast. So these were patrolling right next to us. So we could have been like on the brink of war and attack at any time. Now, when we talk about the next impact, this is called the sinking of the Lusitania. Sinking of the Lusitania. Basically, the Lusitania was a passenger ship. It was going back and forth from the United States to England. Now, this was just a passenger ship where everybody thinks like Titanic. But unfortunately, the Germans come in, they set it in its sights, they bomb it, and now Americans have died. So now it's not just Europeans being upset. Now it's Americans. We just had 200 people of Americans die on the Lusitania. Now, here's the interesting part about the Lusitania, though. The whole passenger ship thing was a fallacy. That was not true. In fact, we may have secretly been transporting weapons to England in some suitcases down in the hull. And Germany may have known about this. So while America portrays this as, oh my gosh, the Lusitania, they murdered our people, our poor women and children are dying, there was actually a point behind it. Americans were sneaking in weapons over into England, and Germany knew that. Yes.
So were there actual passengers on it, or?
Yeah, I think there was 1,800 people that died in the sinking of Lusitania.
Oh, that's a lot.
Yeah, it was like the sinking of the Titanic, and they sunk right off the coast of Ireland, and so people were able to watch the sinking happen. Yeah.
Didn't this happen a lot more than once, though?
Yes, but so this didn't happen just to America. This is just why America is going to go into war. The Falaba is the other one that's the really popular one, but that was an English ship in particular. Okay, so now we have this heading into war, and people begin to see this as now we need to start doing something. We begin to switch to what's called neutrality to actually interventionism. So you will need to know neutrality, arrow, intervention. Okay? That's the idea of neutrality is neutral. We're not going to be a part of this. But now Americans are involved, and now people are dying.
Was Switzerland involved?
Switzerland, no. They're neutral, I believe, in both world wars. Okay. We are out of time, but we're so close to having America into the war. So we will finish this next class, and then we'll head into the Roaring 20s. So we'll finish World War II next class.